Hello and welcome to the seventh in our Coffee and Culture series. This session is a really practical one. It's focused on how we can shape culture habits that fuel growth. For those who I haven't met yet, I'm Sarah McClellan. I'm a work psychologist and I am the founder and author of Make It Human, a company focused on equipping leaders with the skills and tools to shape growth cultures. When I was writing Make It Human, I was struck by the finding that some of the world's best, most successful organizations all share certain things in common. And in particular, one thing that they all do really well is to keep focusing on shaping growth habits. And I'll talk you through and share some examples of those so that you can put these in place in your own organization. So let's get started. And what I want to share first, many of you, I suspect, will have seen before if you're following some of the work that we do. Our work all focuses around shaping a growth culture. This is the formula that we find time and time again in really successful, durable organizations. It doesn't happen by chance, it is intentional and purposeful, and the focus is sustained. So we have to keep focused on shaping great culture. And growth cultures have five elements. They focus on creating conditions in the workplace. So, places where people feel safe, they feel valued, they feel supported, but also where they feel able to flex their work approaches to find balance, to find ways to sustain themselves and their levels of energy. They also feel accountability. People don't just turn up to work because they have to, they actually turn up because they want to contribute. So, being clear around what good looks like and how people can contribute is really important. Thirdly, they are very focused on shaping a sense of community, a place where people feel that they belong, that they're valued, that they're part of something. They also focus on creating a sense of empowerment so people feel trusted to do what's right. They don't have to wait for others to tell them or guide them all the time. There's a real alignment and understanding about what good looks like and how we get there. And finally, they are laser focused on enabling growth, and not just through big programs or transformational efforts, but in the everyday, in the habits, in the techniques, in the approaches and processes that we use. And that obviously is going to be a big focus of our discussion today. So that's the basis. This is what a growth culture looks like. However, without intentional focus and action, cultures do slip towards toxicity. And that really is because we're human. As humans, we are biased, we're ego led, we're also lazy, we look for shortcuts, we look for quicker ways of doing things. So we have to keep proactively nudging towards conditions for sustainable growth every day. Otherwise, we risk sliding towards the left hand side on these sliders towards a culture where hustle, blame, exclusivity, power, know it all is the feature and the experience. And of course, that leads to greater experiences of toxicity, which damages people and damages organizations. So we need to keep nudging along these sliders in through focusing in very specific ways on the habits that we know create these conditions where people and business can thrive. So how do we do that? A good place to start is to understand where your culture is at today. Now, there are many ways that you can do this, and there's lots of ideas in the members area on our website. And it is also something we can help you with. So, we often do culture captures, which are a really quick way of turning some of your existing data on your people, whether it's engagement surveys, Glassdoor reviews, or exit interview data. We can turn that into objective insight to understand where your culture is at today. But if you want something even quicker and faster, instantly, then what you can do is take the growth culture scorecard. So answer a few questions. It takes a couple of minutes, and you can get some powerful insights on where your culture is at today. And then that gives you the basis for then focusing on the areas that you need to improve, that you need to strengthen. So I'd really encourage you to go and do that. And you can find this again in the members area of our website. If you just search for growth culture, an article will come up with a link to this really short diagnostic. But before we dive into the habits themselves, I want to share with you why habits hold the key, why they're so important. And I'm sure many of you have read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. I have, and I think it's great. And I think it holds some really great insights for us as individuals, families, but also as teams, as organizations. And James Clear talks about the habit loop. So this loop that almost kind of automates, prompts and automates the way that we behave. And when you look across your day, again, as an individual or collectively as a team, you'll find there are specific habits that you engage in even without thinking about it. So things that you do on autopilot. And what we need to do is understand what are the things that are helping us to grow collectively, what are the things that are blocking that. And of course, we can use the 5 elements to understand and focus our efforts in a structured way around those things. But also what we can do is dial into this habit loop to then kind of rewire, reprogram the habits that enable us to sustain growth. And a simple example of this would be around exercise. So if you're anything like me, this is something that I struggle to do on a regular basis without specifically being focused on it and rewiring the habit loop to make it feel effortless, to make it feel rewarding, and something that's built within my day. So from a cue perspective, and James Clear talks about this in the book, I have to make sure I put my kit out the night before, make it as simple, easy, and effortless for me to think, okay, yes, I'm going to go to the gym today. I'm going to do some form of exercise. So for me, putting it in my car is really a great cue because I'll see it and then it prompts that craving, that experience, that memory of what the feel good factors that it can create. So it makes me feel good. It's good for me. It's something, once I do it, I feel so much better. Then, of course, you want to make sure that the response is frictionless. So you turn that cue and craving into action. So if it's in my car, I will feel good about, the possibility of doing exercise, more likely to drive to the gym or wherever I'm going, and then get quickly into that exercise. And James Clear talks about having a 2-minute version. So really dialing it down into something that's simple, you can do, you get that hit, and then it gives you more of a motivation to do more. And then, of course, you need a reward at the end of it. With exercise, you do get that feel good factor. It makes you, from a brain chemical point of view, feel better. But then you also see some of the benefits as well. And perhaps you may see friends and get some kind of connection with others if you arrange to meet them too. So this is the very kind of quite simple, quite basic way to think about the habits that we're engaging in. So I'd encourage you to have a look at the habit loop. As an individual, think about how could you create it in a more compelling way for some of the important habits for you. But also this is something that we can use and I think make better use of in teams and organizations to really fuel our growth cultures. So let's now dive into what some of those exercise on my mind now, what some of those habits look like. And we're doing it in a structured way. So in relation to the 5 elements that I've talked about. And what I've done is draw from some of the most successful, thriving organizations in the world right now, to get some snippets of what is it that they're doing so that you can take some inspiration, and I'm sure you may well have other things that you're doing, and I'd love to hear if you want to share, because it's great, I think, to build up this library of really short, simple, quick to apply habits that can help nudge your culture towards growth. So, in terms of workplace, here's a couple of great examples. PwC and also LinkedIn, they have specifically helped people to switch off and recharge by doing things like early finishes during the summer months, or having company or function or team shutdown periods so people can really properly recharge. There is nothing like a break from work when everyone else has that break too. And I think then, you don't come back to the mountain of emails or Slack messages. So it is, a great way to really recharge and build it into the way that we work. Dropbox, you may well have heard me talk about this before, but I think, a lot of the noise around hybrid work and how do we really make it work is because it feels hard to orchestrate people who are working remotely, people who are working in offices or on site. How do we create connection? How do we create feelings of trust and collaboration? And actually, a lot of it is about being intentional, and building toolkits, advice, things that people can pick up and use to make this simpler to do. And Dropbox are doing a really great job of that. They're saying it can work. Hybrid can be a great model in so many ways, but we've got to think more specifically and intentionally about how we equip our managers in particular and our teams with the tools to make it simple and easy to bring people together to collaborate across very distributed and diverse workforces. And then finally, in this section, Shopify, we talked about this one just the other day. They've done a lot around meetings, recognizing that meetings very often are sapping people's time and they're not necessarily always best use of our time. They're kind of draining energy. So they do a couple of things. They've introduced no meeting Wednesdays. They also have this meeting cost calculator that just makes people stop and think, is this the best way to solve this problem? Do I need all of these people? So kind of breaking that habit cycle that we can get stuck in. So some great ideas, I think. If this is an area for you that's coming out, then have a think and see, is there something I could try here? And perhaps there's something else that you could try too. As you'll get the sense, they don't have to be big, expensive, difficult things to implement. That, I think, is really the beauty of habits and the impact that habits can make. So some things to think about for workplace. In terms of accountability, I'll just pull out a couple here that I quite like. So having a real everyday link to a broader purpose. This can be so motivating, but also so simple. Best Buy, a retailer in the United States, and Hubert Joly, who was the CEO there for a number of years, and he talked about human magic. So really talking about how things just flow and work when people understand why they're doing what they're doing, when they're connected to a broader purpose. You don't have to intervene, you don't have to steer so much because people have that aligned understanding. And they bring that into their everyday by having purpose moments, pausing, reflecting, sharing how their work connects to that bigger, broader reason, that bigger purpose. You also see that quite a lot in safety focused, safety critical organizations where they'll have safety moments because we need to keep drawing our attention to, this is why we're doing this is the risk, this is why we follow these procedures. Obviously, that has quite a different lens in terms of motivating. Another one that I think's quite nice, Toyota, who are well known for their focus on the Kaizen principle, so continuous improvement, and they have this approach that they call the Andon Cord, essentially a system that enables anyone working in the organisation to stop the production line if they spot an issue, and it triggers something visual and audible, and a team leader has to respond within a time limit. And if the issue isn't resolved quickly, they then do some root cause analysis. And this really helps reinforce shared ownership and faster problem solving. So, making it safe, making it normal to raise when something happens, and encourage daily improvements. And they'll have thousands, hundreds of thousands probably, of small things that are identified and improved every day. It's just a couple there. Community. So again, I'll just pull out a few here. I quite like Salesforce, what they are doing here. This is more of a focus on the environment and how does the environment shape the culture that we then nurture. So they are really influenced by the Hawaiian principle of ahana. So a principle that is all about family and mutual support. So they've created these ahana floors that are quite open, inviting, vibrant spaces with comfortable seating, and they can run events and collaboration moments and opportunities for people within the organization, but also clients and partners. So really trying to emphasize this is a key part of us. This is what we value, and trying to build it into the everyday more through the environment that they're creating. Also, Zappos, so again, a US based organization, they're trying to inject more meaningful fun. And some organizations this would go down well, others perhaps not so well. But having regular team events, really thinking about what's going on. Are there particular festivals we want to celebrate? Are there themed parties, even costume parades? Apparently they will have, but linking it to something meaningful from a purpose perspective that helps bring people together, create connection, and create motivation. I remember doing something when I led a European professional services team throughout COVID. We hadn't all met each other, and we organised a virtual pub crawl, which sounds quite difficult to do, but actually it worked really well. So we had people sort of showcased their cultural cuisines and drinks, and they had different music and dress codes, and just was a fun way. You had to obviously supply your own drink. Couldn't pass that virtually quite yet. But yeah, it was a fun way of building connection given the restrictions that we had, and people talked about it for months, even years to come. So some things that you can do if you are intentional and focused. And obviously a lot of it is giving people the tools, some of the autonomy to think in creative ways about how do we bring people together? How do we build connection? The fourth area is all about empowerment. And this is such a key thing, a key thread running through successful, growing organizational cultures. A couple of examples here. Obviously, feedback is often a really key feature in organizations that are able to build this sense of empowerment. Because if you're holding back information, then you're not really encouraging open dialogue. Adobe is an organization, there are many who have done this, moved from obviously quite annual based review processes to making them more frequent check-ins. So encouraging ongoing dialogue, talking about goals, talking about feedback, talking about career development, but making it much more of an ongoing conversation. So you don't have to wait for that moment, whether it's biannually or annually. Also, a number of organisations have done this too, creating ownership for customer satisfaction, for resolving issues by assigning a budget. So the example shared here is for the Ritz-Carlton, the hotel chain, that every employee is authorised to spend up to $2,000 per guest per day to resolve issues without manager approval, so that they have pride, they can take ownership, and they can resolve things quickly and effectively. So just a couple of ideas that you could focus on there. And then finally, in terms of the 5 elements that we focus on in growth cultures, is growth. So how do you weave into the everyday these opportunities, these moments, these tools that mean that learning and career growth and skills development are an everyday occurrence. And here are a few examples, and they don't always have to be big, expensive, technology-led even interventions. So Google implement peer-to-peer coaching, so it has some real benefits both for people being coached, but also the peers coaching their peers, because you're developing skills, you're sharing expertise, you're kind of personalizing learning in a scalable way. So I quite like that example. At Pixar, they have brain trust meetings, so where creators are presenting their work and they're receiving candid, constructive feedback from peers and their leaders. So work has to go in here into creating a psychologically safe, blame-free environment where people can share feedback and ideas constructively and not feel defensive, not feel that this isn't constructive feedback for them. So it does take effort to create, but these sorts of things can have a really big and actually quite quick impact. So a few things to have a think about and look at if this is an area that you need to improve. So I guess the question for you to reflect on is, how will you nudge your culture towards growth? And I like this image because it helps us understand how often those small, seemingly unimportant or irrelevant daily habits that we engage in actually quickly mount up and become, well, this is how we do things here. We always start the day like this. We only meet when this happens. We don't share learnings because no one ever has, or it feels threatening, or it feels career damaging even to do so. You can quickly see how these things mount up and become how things are done around here, and then of course that creates the culture. So the big question is, are your habits creating a foundation for sustainable growth? As I said, you can use many of the tools that are available in the members site on our website to evaluate further, to pick up and use different tools, different models to get a sense of what's going on underneath the surface. And if we can help you, then please do get in touch. But I would really encourage you to get some information on where is your culture now, and then focus some of your activity and energy on trying a couple of these habits, even if it's in your own team or as an individual, and see the impact that it has. The more that we can nudge towards growth and keep nudging towards growth, the better. So that's it for this week's topic. The last thing for me to say is that the next Coffee and Culture will actually be the last one before we have a break over the summer period. And I thought it would be a good idea to have this a more of an open house, a kind of ask me anything type session. So applying one of the habits that was shared earlier. So this will be our final meetup before a summer break. So I'd encourage you to bring your questions and any stories around culture or practical experiences that you want to share. If you have ideas, if you have topics that you would like to discuss and you want to share them in advance, then please do drop me an email on LinkedIn or via our website, and I can focus some of the discussion in those areas. So looking forward to what you can bring then on the 17th of July. Thanks very much for listening, for watching back, and see you soon.